The Travel Transformation Podcast is proud to be partnered with Give the Goodness Global, an amazing global outreach project helping families in need all over Southeast Asia and beyond. Please check them out at Instagram.com/Give the Goodness Global today. And now on to the podcast episode.
Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation, exploring the life-changing potential of solo travel, intentional travel, and location-independent working. Whether you're an aspiring digital nomad or simply wish to boost your confidence through epic travel experiences, I'm here to motivate and inspire you to go after all your wildest dreams. I'm Jessica Grace Coleman, author, certified travel coach, founder of the Travel Transformation Company, and your host for the Travel Transformation Podcast. Travel changed my life. Now let's change yours. You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation. My name is Jessica Grace Coleman and I'm your host. And today I'm talking to Cath Jordan, founder of the Travel Around Ireland website, a website dedicated to helping travellers plan their perfect vacation to Ireland. She is an Irish expat, now living in Portugal with her husband, son and dog, though she makes sure to return to her homeland at least once a year. In this episode, we discuss life in Africa, Ireland, the UK and Portugal, raising a child in a different country, and how we should focus on what's on our doorstep, while these things are still on our doorstep. I'm a huge Ireland fan, as I mentioned in the interview, so I really enjoyed having Cath on the podcast today. Okay, let's get straight to the interview. Hi, Cath. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Jess.
Great. Okay, so to start with, please can you give me and our listeners a bit of background info about you, where you're from, where you live now, and a little bit about your story so far?
Sure, no problem. My name is Cath, and I'm Irish, originally from Dublin, but at the moment we're living in Portugal after 15 years in the UK. I was born and raised in Southern Africa until the age of 9, thanks to my dad's work. So that's, I think, where my travel bug has come from. I have a PhD in chemistry, but I'm no longer in that career field at the moment, mainly down to the lack of jobs in my field where we're based, and also the language barrier, because Portuguese is not an easy language to learn.
Yeah, I'm not a huge language person. I wish I was. I wish I could speak. I meet people who speak like 7 languages and I'm just in awe of them. Yeah, I totally get that. So Ireland, Southern Africa, Portugal, UK, they're all pretty different places. So whereabouts in Africa were you? And do you remember much about your childhood growing up there? What was it like?
I was born in Botswana and we lived there for about 2 years. And then we had a year back in Ireland before we moved to South Africa, and that's where the majority of my childhood was spent until the age of 9. I don't have a huge amount of memories from it. There are snippets here or there and that, but the memories I have are good, and my dad fills in the blanks when I need them to be filled in.
Nice. I went to South Africa at the start of this year for the first time, and it's so beautiful and yeah, so nice, and everyone's so lovely there. Do you think that maybe sort of affected you, like you say, the travel bug, knowing that you're born somewhere else and that it's possible to move around and, that kind of thing, whereas so many people are born in one place and like just never leave until they're, an adult. Do you think that sort of changed the way you looked at things?
I think it's given me a sense of freedom in terms of I don't have a fear of change. I don't have a fear of being in a different country for any length of time because I've done it since I was practically born. So changing to a different country with different cultures is not as much of a shock to the system as it might be for other people who, as you say, have been born and bred and lived most of their lives in one place. I don't have that kind of fear or that. There are certain fears about certain aspects of it, but the actual process of going and moving to a new place is kind of, you just take it on your chin.
Yeah, it's not as sort of daunting as it would be for some people, I imagine. Yeah. Whereabouts in the UK did you live?
So we started in the Midlands in a place called Wellington, which was near Shrewsbury in Shropshire. And we spent 3 years there before moving down to South Wales, where we spent 12 years. We moved down because my husband was working down in South Wales, and then he took to the road, so he was kind of everywhere. But Wales felt very much like home to me because it's so like Ireland, with green fields and sheep instead of cows and lots of rain. So I never felt homesick in Wales.
Nice. I'm actually from Stafford in Staffordshire, so not far from Shrewsbury. So I know that area.
Yeah, we had friends from Staffordshire as well.
Nice, nice. And I know you absolutely love Ireland. So when you came to leave it, was that a hard decision to make, or did you know that you'd always go back to visit, so it wasn't too bad?
Yeah, I think the fact that we were moving to the UK and it was only an hour or an hour and 20 minutes maximum on a flight meant that it never felt like it was the other side of the world. It was easy to hop on a flight or even take a ferry, although that was a bit longer, but it never felt like we were moving that far away. And I was still young. I was still 25, I think it was at the time, when my husband went first. He was then my boyfriend. He went first to take up a job. I was finishing my PhD, and then I just naturally followed afterwards. So there was never any kind of doubt or fear or anything like that. It was just the other side of the Irish Sea.
Yeah. And how about Portugal? What made you move there?
That's a bit of a longer story. So my dad, during the 90s, worked in Angola on the west coast of Africa. And Angola was a Portuguese colony. My mum and myself and my sisters never went to visit him there because it was the middle of a civil war. But he was working on the mines as a stock controller and food distributor. His background is he's a retired chef now. But he was working with a lot of Portuguese and Brazilians as a result of it being a former colony of Portugal. And when my mum and my dad started doing more kind of solo holidays after we had kind of grown up and they didn't need to babysit us, so to speak, they started going to Portugal twice a year, visiting different places, kind of doing the Algarve for a week and then maybe somewhere around Lisbon for a second week. And when my mum came up to retirement age, because my dad's older than her, he said, right, that's it. I want to move somewhere warm. I don't want to stay in Ireland. It's too cold for my bones. So they settled on Portugal. At the time that they moved here, my husband had been working remote fully for about a year. And previously he'd been traveling in the UK from Monday morning to Thursday evening. And our son was 3 at the time. And we kind of jokingly said, oh, we'll get a holiday place in Portugal. And then holiday place kind of eventually moved to, well, we have no ties in Wales. Why don't we just sell up and move and see what happens? And it was as a result of my parents moving here that we kind of hijacked their retirement and followed them. Living in Wales and them living in Ireland, our son only kind of saw them a couple of times a year when either we went to visit them or they came to visit us. So we thought it'd be a chance for him to have more quality time with his grandparents, and it's turned out exactly that way.
Amazing. So do you live nearby, like now in Portugal?
Yeah, we're about 10, 15 minutes from my dad, but 18 months ago we managed to buy a bigger house. We were living in a very small 2-bedroom place before that. And we managed to buy a bigger house, and the pandemic was a driving force of that, because within Portugal during the pandemic, people had to stay in sort of their counties. You weren't allowed to go outside of county lines during the lockdowns, which meant we couldn't see him other than perhaps doing FaceTime with him and that a couple of times a week. And it was quite hard. So we bought a bigger house, and he spends probably 50% of his time here. He has his own bedroom and he can come and go as he wants. So we're close. He's either here or he's down in his place, but we're never too far from one another.
Oh, nice. And what would you say are the biggest differences you found between living in the UK and Ireland and living in Portugal in terms of culture or lifestyle or anything like that?
Quite a number. We kind of liken Portugal to Ireland 30 years ago. It's extremely laid back. The people are very relaxed. Their kind of service industry, if you take it outside of the restaurants and the cafes and the bars, their service industry is extremely relaxed. So they say, oh, we'll be with you tomorrow. And you say, well, what time tomorrow? Between 10 and 8. And you're like, I can't do anything. You know, we've had to learn patience, because my dad had a saying, amanhã, which means tomorrow. It'll be like, it'll happen whenever. We've had to take a step back because we're so used to things being almost instantaneous in the UK and Ireland. You know, somebody says they'll be there at 10 a.m. in the morning, maybe half an hour later if there's been traffic or something. The Portuguese, there's no rush. It's all chill out. It's fine. It'll get done. So that was one of the biggest things that we've had to adjust ourselves to, is just getting into a more of a relaxed way and kind of thinking it will get done. We just don't know when it'll get done. So I think that was one of our biggest things. And we've actually find there are some people who find it very difficult to adjust to that culture. They're still very much used to things being done when they want it being done and don't understand how or why it can't continue like that. I'm sure it'll get to a more instantaneous way of things in the future, but for now it's very chilled and relaxed, which kind of suits us now.
Nice. I've spent quite a bit of time in Spain, and it's very similar in terms of the laid back lifestyle. Like, things will get done when it gets done. You make a sort of reservation for 7:00 and they don't really expect you to turn up until like 8 at least, like no one ever like sticks to the time. Like, that's just normal.
Some of the restaurants look at us and go, "You're here on time?"
Yeah.
This is very strange.
Yeah. We had a reservation once. We were going to be like 15 minutes late and we phoned them to let them know, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, what's the problem here?" And we were like, "Oh, okay." That kind of
exactly
thing.
The same here. Exactly the same. Yeah.
You're right. It is quite hard to get used to, but I think it is a good thing to get used to in this crazy, fast-paced, chaotic world, to just try and be more relaxed in general.
Exactly. I find myself sometimes getting almost a little bit anxious when I go to, whether it's London or Dublin, because you're going into a city where everything is fast-paced. People are on a deadline or they have to get somewhere, and everyone's kind of rushing, and there's no breathing. Everyone's just so pent up in it. And I find that quite anxious now and stressful, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely with you on that one. Okay, so you have a website, Travel Around Ireland. Why did you decide to start this site, and who is it for?
So in 2014, towards the end of my son's first year, I decided to start blogging because my sister-in-law was blogging, my husband was kind of loosely doing it, and I thought, I'll do it, we'll see what this is about. It was a lifestyle blog, and I eventually moved it to travel because I felt it was more suited to what I wanted to write about and my passions. But I had been thinking about, it was more a family travel blog, and I thought about starting a specific one for Ireland. But I had kind of hemmed and hawed for a couple of years, and I thought, well, I'm not there full time. We do go back regularly. Can I really write enough about it? And in 2019, I took the plunge and I thought, well, I might as well, we'll see what happens. And then the pandemic hit. Nobody was traveling, so I didn't really work on it that much. But in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, I've been putting a lot of time into it. Basically, the goal of it is to help people just plan a trip to Ireland and help them decide where to visit, where to go, where to stay, things like that. The majority, I'd say, of my readers come from America, and then I have people from Australia, from the UK, and then Ireland as well, because people are either already in Ireland and they want to find new places to go, or they're locals looking for a day out, for instance. So it's kind of a mixed bag of people, I suppose, or a mixed genre of people, but the whole focus is people who want to plan a trip to Ireland or decide once they're there where they want to go and what they want to see.
Great. And I just want to say I'm a big Ireland fan. The Irish accent is my favourite accent in the entire world. And I've been to a few places in Ireland, like obviously Dublin a few times, and I've done a sort of bit of a road trip around. And my friend in uni, her parents lived in Waterford, so I went and visited them. Very cute. Yeah. But there's so much more I need to explore. So if someone hasn't been before, if they've just been to Dublin and done the usual touristy things and stuff like that, where would you recommend people start? Or would you recommend any hidden gems that you think people should know about that maybe they don't?
Well, for us, we're also exploring Ireland, because when you're based in Ireland full time, you live there and you work there, you kind of just take it for granted that things are on your doorstep. And a lot of Irish people don't actually explore the country as much as you would think. They kind of maybe go to Galway for a weekend away or go to Belfast for a weekend away, and they kind of don't go into the depths and the nooks and crannies. So even for me, I'm still exploring all the far corners of Ireland. But from the ones that we've been to, I think one of the places that kind of surprised us was Wexford. So it has this nickname in Ireland called the sunny southeast, because it's down in the southeast corner. It gets good sunshine, or it gets better weather compared to a lot of the rest of the country. So people tend to flock there, even Irish, for either retirement or for holidays and that. And last August, in August 2022, we decided to explore Wexford, because it was many, many years since I'd been there with my own family camping, but we tend to go to just this one town and that was it. And it quite surprised us because there was so much to see and do. We were there for 6 days, I think it was, and it's a large enough county. We only did the southern half of the county. We didn't even touch the northern half. So I think Wexford very much surprised us. Another thing that has come about is something called the Wild Atlantic Way. So it follows the coast from Cork all along the west coast up to County Donegal. And as it turns out, my husband and I did part of this route, our honeymoon in 2010, on his motorbike. And it was 4 years later that the Irish Tourism Board actually coined it the Wild Atlantic Way. So we're actually hoping next summer to do about 3 weeks doing the southern half of that to explore it even more with our son, because it wasn't called that when we did it, but it was a part of Ireland that really surprised us. And it's so varied and so beautiful, the landscape, that there's something for everybody.
Yeah, there's still so many places I need to explore. If someone hasn't been before and they might not know if they can go again for a while, like how long would you suggest someone go for if they want to do a bit more exploring rather than just the normal touristy bit?
I think 2 weeks is probably an ideal time. Seems to be kind of, you can put 3 or 4 days aside for Dublin to explore the city and see all the kind of tourist attractions and what have you. And then it gives you 10 or 11 days to do other areas of Ireland as well. I see a lot of people, I have a Facebook group which is kind of attached to my blog, and I see a lot of people doing one night here and then moving somewhere else. But the trouble with that is you don't get to explore that area, and you're spending so much time on the road moving between place to place that I think you kind of miss out, which is why we've definitely in the last couple of years stopped doing road trips that go from one place to the next place to the next place during, sequential days. And we tend to do a couple of days in one place and then move on and do a couple of days in another place, because you get to immerse yourself in that area a lot more than just an overnighter. So I think 2 weeks is probably ideal. That's what most people will do. And they'll do a couple of days in Dublin, either at the beginning or at the end of their trip. So they get to see the city and they get to do the touristy things, but they also get to go out and discover the country, because there's so much more to Ireland than just Dublin.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful as well once you get out into the rural areas, all the green fields. Yeah. Amazing. You mentioned your son a little bit there. I have a couple of questions around this. How has it been raising a child in another country? Have you had any big obstacles or hurdles around that?
I think in terms of him and his adjustment, no. When we came to Portugal, he was 3.5. We'd been living in Wales and he'd been going to nursery there. And what we decided was, as soon as September came that year in 2017, we enrolled him into Portuguese preschool because we knew he needed to become immersed in the language in order to pick it up. So for him, there was no major adjustments. Of course, there were a few tears in the first couple of weeks, but within sort of 6 weeks, he was settled. He was understanding what people were saying to him. Another 6 weeks, he was conversing back with them. Now he's 9 and he's correcting my Portuguese. He keeps saying, no, that's not how you say it. But I think it's more worrisome for parents because you don't know how your child is going to adjust. You don't know, are they going to cope? Are they going to like it? Or are they just going to hate it? I think so. For us, it was a big adjustment because we were putting them into a situation where none of us knew the language. None of us could speak it. We had the very basics of hello and goodbye. But to actually understand what somebody was speaking to us, we were completely lost. So I think the adjustment was bigger for us knowing whether or not he was going to be okay. And even for the last couple of years when we've had to deal with sort of maybe doctors who don't speak English, or he's going to speech therapy, and we've got orthodontists as well who don't speak a lot of English, it's been kind of a baptism of fire because I've had to learn Portuguese. I've had to get enough so that even if I don't understand 100% of what they're saying to me, I can understand 70 to 80 so I can get a gist exactly of what they're saying so that I can kind of piece it together. So I think the adjustment is harder for parents than it is for children who are of a young age. Obviously, older children might find it more difficult to pick up the language. So that's a different kettle of fish for families with older children. But for the younger ones, I've never kind of understood when people said, oh, children are sponges at that age, until we put them into the preschool and then realized within 3 months, my child is speaking another language that I hardly understand. So yeah, the adjustment has been more for us than for him, I'd say.
Yeah, I find that incredible. And I'm also a little bit jealous that children can just go and learn a language like that. It's like,
we actually find now that because he was 3 going into school and he's essentially learning 2 languages at the same time, there are certain words in English that he has never come across or he doesn't understand. And he will say to us, oh, Mom, what's this word? And he'll say it in Portuguese, in English. And I'm like, Google Translate, what is that? Or he will do translation. You can see him doing translation in his head from Portuguese to English. There's certain ways that he says things and you think he's actually doing a translation in his head to get the English of it. And it's incredible to watch.
Wow. And for you, obviously being immersed in the language helped a lot, but did you use any apps or any programs or anything to help you?
I just want to interrupt this awesome podcast episode for a moment to tell you about Write Your Life, the ultimate life hack for achieving your dreams by Jessica Grace Coleman, a book that teaches you how to design your dream life and then go live it. Life is what you make it. Life is what you write it to be. And you can write whatever you want. Let me show you how. The Write Your Life method gives you all the tools and techniques you need to identify your ambitions, plan your goals, and ultimately achieve all your wildest dreams, all while having fun and getting creative. And you don't need to be a writer to benefit from the Write Your Life method. This book can help anyone, anywhere design their ultimate dream lifestyle. Get it now from Amazon or head to www.traveltransformationcoach.com/books. You'll also get a digital copy completely free when you sign up to the Flip the Script Academy at traveltransformationcoach.com/academy, where we teach you that life is short, so let's make sure it's nothing short of amazing. And now let's get back to the Travel Transformation Podcast.
I started off when he was in preschool using a thing called Memrise, because Duolingo is Brazilian Portuguese. And it's actually quite a bit different to European Portuguese. So I found through a lot of the expat Facebook groups, which are such a wealth of information there, they were all saying use Memrise. So I did that. But then I think it was a year before he started primary school, I decided I was doing one language lesson a week, but I actually upped it to 2 language lessons a week with a dedicated teacher on a one-to-one basis, because I knew he was going to be going into primary school. I knew we were going to be doing homework together because I'm the one that doesn't work full time, so I have to be able to help him. And in order to be able to help him, I needed to be able to understand what the book was saying, 90% of the time. There's still times I need to check a dictionary or on Google Translate and figure things out. But for the most part, I needed to be able to sit down and help him through his homework. So as I said, I started with the Memrise app and then I started lessons, one-to-one lessons as well. I've only just this week dropped down to 1 lesson per week, and I also attend group lessons once or twice a week where there are other people who are in the same situation as me. They're older, they're not doing it for their children's benefit, but they're doing it for their own benefit so that they can converse with people. And we just sit down and we have a conversation about something, and sometimes it's all in Portuguese, sometimes it's a mixture of English and that, but it's a good way to learn. But I think one-to-one lessons were the things that really helped me progress.
God, I didn't even think about having to help him with his homework. That's a lot. I'm
dreading when it comes to kind of maths in the future, because it's going to be worded in Portuguese, and then I have to decipher that to kind of get my head around it, because some of the ways they actually present the wording or the way they word it is very confusing when you translate it. And I'm looking at going, okay, I need to ask. And I ask my Portuguese teacher, what are they asking us in this? And she's like, oh, okay, I can see what they're doing. So it's a baptism of fire.
Wow.
It's
That's a whole other area that I hadn't even considered. That's a lot. I know you go back to Ireland every year, is it? You still go back every year?
We tend to go back at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And yeah, it just depends. Most of the time what we'll do is we'll spend a night or 2 near Dublin to see family, because they're all based in Dublin. And then, as I said, we pick a place where we haven't been before, or it's been a long time that we've been, and we spend the best part of a week there, going out doing day trips, exploring different areas that are close to our base.
And I know you say that it's important for your son to visit Ireland and to be aware of his heritage and where he comes from and all that kind of thing. So what kind of things about Ireland do you want to make sure your son grows up knowing? Or is it just you literally want him to be able to explore as much of the country as possible?
Maybe a better knowledge of its history than I ever did, because I think coming into Ireland, I was 9 when we returned full time. And when we go into secondary school, you don't learn a huge amount of Irish history. You do history of the world and what have you. And I realized leaving school that I didn't actually know a lot about Ireland. I didn't know a lot about its geography or its history. So because he won't be immersed in an Irish school to learn those sort of things, it's up to me to kind of give it to him. And even though he's only 9, he quite likes turning around to people and saying, no, I'm Irish. So for me, I think it's important because I moved around so much when I was younger as well. And it's only now I kind of get a real sense of my heritage being out of the country so much that I kind of want to give him the opportunity to have that. And myself and my husband are the teachers who have to do that for him.
Yeah. And does he have a Portuguese accent? Does he have any Irish lilt there? I'm intrigued.
It's really quite funny because when we left Wales, he was starting to get the Welsh accent. Yeah. And we could hear it, friends and family could hear it. And then when we came here, he was obviously in school with Portuguese kids. But about a year and a half ago, I featured him on my Instagram stories, I think it was. And somebody said to me, oh, I love his Irish accent. I went, what? And I didn't think he had one because he came from a Welsh environment where he was picking it up in nursery. And then he wasn't really in contact with a lot of other English-speaking people. When we first came here, I was thinking, that's really strange. But he does. He has an Irish accent when he's speaking English. It's not a very strong one, maybe like my husband's and mine, but it is there. And then when he switches to Portuguese, it's a Portuguese accent, to the point where people actually heard him speak in English and they kind of go, is he not Portuguese? And we're like, Irish. And they're really surprised because he does have the accent, and the Algarve accent is very different to, for instance, Lisbon or Porto. They tend to cut the front of their words and the end of their words and then mix words together. So it's quite, if you can learn Portuguese in the Algarve, you can speak it. So he has that where he's mashing things together. And when he's writing them in his homework, we're having arguments because I say to him, that's not how you write it. It's 2 words. And he's like, no, Mom, it's 1 word. So it's really surprising that the 2 different languages actually have 2 different accents. So strange.
That's fascinating, isn't it? I love stuff like that. Okay. Do you think you'll ever move back to Ireland? Is that anything you would be open to?
I would be, but my husband won't. My husband hates the rain, hates the cold. The weather in Wales is one of the driving factors for him as well. And he actually jokes with his business partner who's from the States. He says to him, it's a bad day in Portugal when he has to put socks on in the winter. So I don't think we'll ever move back to Ireland. There's never say never, because we never ever dreamed we would move to Portugal. So you never know what the future will hold. But no, as far as my husband's concerned, it's too cold and too wet.
Oh, but he doesn't mind visiting there. He's okay with that.
No, he doesn't actually. I think for the first couple of years when I was taking my son back and doing kind of road trips and that, he was working and he was like, no, I don't want to go to Ireland. We'll do a holiday somewhere else in Europe. And I'm like, okay. But in the last couple of years, he's joined us and he's quite enjoyed it because we haven't been based in Dublin. So he doesn't like visiting Dublin for too long. We don't enjoy city life anymore. But the fact that we've been going to different places and visiting different areas of the country, he's actually quite enjoying that now. So I think as long as we spend minimal time in Dublin, he'll do his week or 10 days or what have you in Ireland, and he's happy with that. So long as we have a holiday elsewhere during the rest of the year.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, so I asked you where your favourite places in the world are, and you said Ireland, of course, and then you said Yellowstone in the US and Thailand. So can you tell me why Yellowstone and Thailand are so special to you?
We've been to America a couple of times, but in 2017, we actually did a road trip and we flew from Portugal to London and then on to Portland in Oregon, which is on the northern west coast of America. We did a road trip from there to Yellowstone, spent, I think it was 4 or 5 days in Yellowstone. Then we came back via town in Montana for a couple of days and then back to Portland for a couple of days. And Yellowstone just blew our minds. Ireland is beautiful and there are areas of the rest of the world in Europe where we live that are beautiful, but we were just blown away by the nature, the geysers, all the mud springs, the wildlife that was just randomly on the side of the road as we were driving past, like these bison and these elk. It was something that we had never experienced before. And we loved it, absolutely loved it. We keep saying we have to go back to Yellowstone, we have to go back at some stage. So we will, but it blew our minds. It was just completely different to anything we'd ever experienced before. And then it was quite similar when we went to Thailand. We were down in Ao Nang for a couple of days, which is in the Krabi area, and then flew back to Bangkok. But like that again, taking one of the boats out to the islands and seeing the water and the landscape, it was just, and the temples, it was just, yeah, it was incredible. So I think out of everywhere we've been, those two places have stuck in our minds the most.
Yeah, I love Thailand as well. And I went to Yellowstone when I was younger, and I need to go back as well, because you're right, it's so just incredible. The nature, everything, the bison, like you said, just wandering along.
Exactly. It's just, okay, it's this one area, and it is quite a big area, you know, to get around Yellowstone, you do need a couple of days. But it's all this stuff in this one area, just that you don't see anywhere else. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I was actually looking back over my photos of that trip a while ago, and, got all the geysers and everything. And then some of them just looked like alien landscapes, like, with the like cracked earth and the trees and with like mist everywhere. And I was like, this literally looks like another planet. It's like insane. Yeah, such an amazing place. And I've had a lot of Americans come on the podcast, and they love the UK, and I always find that a bit weird. And then they always find it weird that I want to go to their country. And I'm like, but you've got so many amazing national parks, you've got so much great nature. And, it's always, we want what we don't have, or we're used to where we live and we don't see the good, interesting parts, or, that kind of thing. I always find that quite interesting. So I have two last quick questions. First of all, where can people find and follow you online? And I'll put those in the show notes as well. And is there anything else you want to mention, or any last message you want to get across before we go?
Travel Around Ireland is the name of the website, and it's just travelaroundireland.com. And I have a Facebook page as well, which is, again, Travel Around Ireland. And I have a Facebook group where people can come and get help with planning their trips to Ireland, getting information while they're there. It's the Ireland Travel and Planning group, but it's also linked via the Facebook page and through the website. And we have a range of people from America to Australia and locals who actually share their in-depth knowledge of the country with the group. So those are the places where people can find me. I do have an Instagram for the site, but it's not very big. It's something I kind of need to build up. But Facebook is where I spend most of my time with my group. In terms of messages, I suppose one thing that I have realized since moving from Ireland is that you kind of take for granted what you have on your doorstep. You always want to go somewhere else and see other things. I think people should remember what's on your doorstep and actually get out and just explore it. We missed so much while we were living in Ireland that we're having to go back and do it now. And as a result of learning that lesson, we're actually specifically taking holidays within Portugal to explore the country that we're living in, because I think some people even when they come to Portugal, they stick to the Algarve or they stick to Lisbon where they are, and people don't venture out. And there is just so much to see and do in Portugal. And the landscape changes when you go from south to north, that it's like being in a different country, although you haven't left the country. So I think just a message to people is explore your local areas, go a little bit further, explore your country as well as going and seeing the rest of the world, because you never know, one day something might take you away from there and you realize, actually, I don't know a lot about where I live and I haven't seen a huge amount. And if you go to the other side of the world, it's not as easy to go back and explore places that you might want to go to. I mean, I haven't been to Northern Ireland. I haven't been to the Giant's Causeway yet. They're on my list and I will do them. But being in Ireland would make it so much easier to visit those places.
Could not agree more. There's so many places on my doorstep that I've never been to that I don't know are there. Like, you would be out driving and be like, I never knew that was there. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. So totally agree with that. And I'm definitely going to join your Facebook group because it's on my list to do more exploring of Ireland. So I will definitely join that to get some tips. Okay, well, thank you for coming on the podcast today. It was great talking about all things Ireland and Portugal and everything else. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Jess. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Travel Transformation Podcast with me, Jessica Grace Coleman. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could please subscribe, rate and review, and spread the word, because it's my mission to help as many people as possible to flip the script on their lives and transform through travel. And remember, life is short, so let's make sure it's nothing short of amazing. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.